Once upon a time, in a small town that had seen more than its fair share of danger and crime, there was a retired police dog named Max. Max had spent 8 incredible years working as a canine unit partner to Officer Steve Harris. Together, they had faced the darkest corners of the criminal world, fighting through intense situations, protecting their community, and most importantly, developing a bond that was unbreakable. But after years of service, Max had been retired, given a home with Steve, and allowed to live out his golden years in peace. Little did they both know that their bond would be tested in ways neither of them could have ever imagined. Steve had always admired Max's loyalty and bravery. Max wasn't just a dog, he was his partner, his protector, his friend. Their connection went beyond mere working relationship. There was a trust and understanding between them that words couldn't describe. When Max retired, Steve made sure that he had everything he needed to enjoy his final years. They spent their days together, going on walks, visiting old friends, and reminiscing about their glory days. But those days of excitement and danger seemed far behind them. One cold winter afternoon, Steve received an urgent call from his department. There had been a string of robberies in the area, and the suspect was suspected to be armed and extremely dangerous. The police were in the process of setting up a perimeter to apprehend the criminal, but things had gone wrong. The suspect had evaded capture, and now he was cornered in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. As the situation escalated, Steve was called into action. Though he was no longer on active duty, the department needed all hands on deck. Steve knew that going back into action meant he'd have to leave Max behind, but he promised his old partner that he would always be safe at home. So, with a heavy heart, Steve said goodbye to Max that day, not knowing it would be the last time they would share an ordinary moment. With the team in place, Steve arrived at the scene. The warehouse was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that made every step feel like a thunderous noise. The officers had established a perimeter, and the suspect had been cornered inside. But this wasn't going to be an easy arrest. The suspect was desperate and dangerous. Steve knew from experience that a volatile situation could quickly turn deadly, and this was no exception. As the team began their approach, a sudden gunshot rang out, followed by the unmistakable sound of chaos as the suspect fired wildly into the air. Officers ducked for cover and the plan quickly unraveled. In the blink of an eye, the situation had spiraled out of control. The criminal had taken hostages, and Steve realized that the time to act was now. Knowing that Max had saved his life countless times before, Steve made the split-second decision to call in the retired canine for help. But there was a catch. Max was no longer part of the force. It had been years since they had worked together, and Steve wasn't sure if Max still had the drive to help in such a high-stakes situation. Still, in his heart, Steve knew that there was no one else who could get the job done like Max. Without hesitation, Steve ran back to his car, dialed the number for the animal rescue organization that had been helping retired service animals, and made the call. He asked them to bring Max to the scene immediately. It felt insane to ask a retired dog to jump back into action, but Steve was desperate. He needed his old partner, and the stakes couldn't have been higher. Meanwhile, Max had been resting comfortably at home when he heard the sound of Steve's voice on the phone. Something in Steve's tone was different, urgent. Max had spent years listening to his partner, knowing when things were serious, when it was time to act. Without hesitation, Max sprang up, his years of training kicking in as he recognized the call to action. He knew what it meant. His partner needed him. Max was ready. Max was brought to the scene, his eyes full of determination. As soon as he saw Steve, it was like the years had melted away. The connection between them was still strong, still as powerful as it had been during their time together on the force. Without a word, Steve and Max exchanged a brief look, a silent understanding. They were partners once again. The officers on the scene were in awe as Steve and Max approached the warehouse. Max's body was lean and strong, his eyes sharp and focused. He had been trained for situations like this, and despite his age, he was ready. Steve knew Max's capabilities better than anyone, and he trusted his partner with his life. They were given their instructions, and Steve positioned Max ahead of him as they entered the warehouse. The dangerous suspect was still inside, and the hostages were being held in a back room. Time was running out. The tension in the air was palpable as the team moved quietly, trying to stay out of the line of sight. Steve signaled Max to move forward, and the dog immediately picked up the scent. His trained instincts kicked in as he led the way through the maze of abandoned rooms. Every step was cautious, but Max's confidence and unwavering focus told Steve that they had a real chance to resolve the situation without anyone getting hurt. When they finally cornered the suspect, things escalated quickly. The criminal had his weapon raised and was ready to fire. Steve's heart pounded in his chest, but Max was already in motion. With a speed and agility that belied his years, Max lunged forward, disarming the suspect with a precise and powerful move. The suspect was stunned, unable to react as Max took him down in an instant, pinning him to the ground. Steve rushed in, pulling the weapon from the suspect's hands and securing him. The hostages were freed, and the situation had been defused, thanks to Max. The officers surrounding the area cheered, grateful for the retired dog's bravery and incredible skill. Steve knelt down next to Max, his heart swelling with pride. "You did it, old buddy," Steve said, his voice thick with emotion. Max wagged his tail in response, his eyes full of affection for his partner. It was a moment neither of them would ever forget. Max had proven once again that he wasn't just a police dog, he was family. The bond they shared had never weakened even after retirement. Max had shown the world that true loyalty never fades, and that heroes come in all shapes and sizes, even those with 4 legs. As Steve and Max left the scene, their work done, they shared a quiet moment together. Max was no longer a canine officer, but he had saved his partner's life once again. They didn't need any more recognition or praise. They had what mattered most, each other. And as the sun set over the small town, the bond between Steve and Max was stronger than ever. The retired police dog had not only saved his former partner, he had reminded everyone that true loyalty, courage, and love could never be retired. Max had proven that heroes never grow old.